We'll start with the quarterbacks.
Powered
As
by
far as
Riverside
most
FM.
yards in a single season, if I was guessing, I would have said Peyton Manning, and I would have been wrong. Welcome to Just the Stats NFL, the show that covers the NFL statistical leaders from the all-time greats to the current players leading the NFL. I'm your host, Ernie Jennings, and I am back to look at another team from the AFC South. As I've said before, we're covering every team in the NFL. We started with the AFC. We've already done the AFC East and North, and now we're moving on to the second place Indianapolis Colts. We covered Houston in the previous podcast. Houston Texans are the only team in this division in the AFC South that had a winning record, which says something about the division. But that's just the way it is for 2024. So we'll see how 2025 pans out for this division. It will be a very tough division as far as who ends up first and who ends up last. I think you have a lot of teams where it could go any which way. It's just very difficult to know at this point. So we'll see how the season plays itself out. But looking at the Indianapolis Colts, they finished the season with a record of 8 wins, 9 losses. At home, they were 5 wins and 3 losses. And on the road, they were 3-6. And in the division, they were 3-3, so 500 in the division. 8-9 was their record, so just under 500. But how do the Colts players of 2024 stand in relation to the greatest Colts players of all time? Well, that's what we're going to find out right now in this episode of Just the Stats NFL. So, as usual, let's begin with the coaches. The all-time winningest coach for the Indianapolis Colts is Tony Dungy, who from 2002 to 2008 won 85 games. A really incredible record, 85 wins, 27 losses for a winning percentage of 759. Very, very good. The current coach, Shane Steichen, has 17 wins, so a long ways. If he can maintain himself as the coach of the Indianapolis Colts for more than a couple of years, you could see him move up the list fairly quickly. At 17th, he's the ninth coach on this list, but with another record of 8-9, or if they go 9-8, let's say, he would pass Don McCafferty and Jim Caldwell, previous coaches, and move up into 7th position. So we'll just see how it goes for him. But it'll be a few years if he's still the coach of the Indianapolis Colts before he starts showing up on the top of this list. Yeah, like I said, Tony Dungy's 85 wins. Ted Marchibroda from 1975 to 1995 had 71 wins. So in 20 years, he had 71. Tony Dungy in 6 years had 85. And the same with Don Shula, who's third, which everybody normally would think about the Miami Dolphins, but he was the coach of the Indianapolis Colts from 1963 to 1969. He also had 71 wins. So those are your top three. So when we move away from the coaches and we start looking at the offense, and we'll start with the quarterbacks. Well, one of the greatest of all time, actually two, and one that could have been if he'd have stayed in the NFL. But number one all-time Indianapolis Colts quarterback is Peyton Manning when it comes to yards. He had 54,828 yards passing for the Indianapolis Colts. All-time, Peyton Manning had 71,940, which puts him third all-time in the NFL as far as passing yards go, just beating out Brett Favre. Johnny Unitas is second. He was the quarterback from 1956 to 1972. He had 39,768. And then Andrew Luck, like I said, who could have been a great quarterback but retired way, way early, which is great for him. That's what he felt he needed to do. But he's third with 23,671 yards as far as being the quarterback for the Indianapolis Colts. So your top three quarterbacks. And as of now, with the quarterback situation, the way it is between Anthony Richardson, who currently is sitting at the 19th position all time for the Indianapolis Colts with 2,391 yards. And we'll just see what happens between him and Dan Jones. It's just, who knows? It's all up in the air, but we'll see what happens. When it comes to touchdowns, again, obviously, it's Peyton Manning, has 399 touchdowns for the Indianapolis Colts. Johnny Unitas had 287. He was second. And again, Andrew Luck was third with 171. Those are your top three as far as touchdown passes go. Anthony Richardson is 21st. He has 11. So, it's going to be a long time. I'm not even sure anybody will ever catch Peyton Manning as far as this goes on an individual team record. It's very difficult. It would be, you'd have a Hall of Famer if you do, which would be great for the Colts if that ever happened. Overall, Peyton Manning is third all time in touchdown passes with 539. Only Tom Brady and Drew Brees have more. And it's the same with the passing yards. Only Tom Brady and Drew Brees had more. When we're looking at interceptions, now this is where there is a change, and I'll let you know why. But Johnny Unitas has the most interceptions. He has 246 interceptions as a player for the Indianapolis Colts. Peyton Manning had 198 interceptions. All time, Peyton Manning is number 9 with 251 interceptions overall. And then Johnny Unitas is 7th with 253. So obviously, even though Johnny Unitas was on another team, he only had 7 interceptions with that team, and the rest of them were all as an Indianapolis Colt player. So there's your top two. When it comes to players, Anthony Richardson has 13 currently. So again, nobody challenging the top of the all-time Colt list as far as quarterbacks go. When it comes to being sacked, now Johnny Unitas again has 293 sacks. Let me go quickly back and tell you why the interception numbers are so interesting. So even though Peyton Manning has the most yards by long ways, the most touchdowns by long ways, the difference is that Johnny Unitas threw an interception every 4.8% of his passes, whereas Peyton Manning threw an interception every 2.7. Quite a difference, which explains why Johnny Unitas had so many more interceptions. And it was a time period when Johnny Unitas was playing where the defense had a lot more leeway in how they could handle a receiver coming out into the defense's area, which it's changed quite a bit. So when it comes to being sacked, like I said, Johnny Unitas, all-time holder with 293 sacks. And then Peyton Manning was sacked 231 times. Huge difference. Peyton Manning has one of the lower sack percentage rates. Johnny Unitas was sacked at a percentage rate of 6.9. Peyton Manning only 3.1. That's quite low, even for today's time period. And you're looking at Anthony Richardson, for example, who's got 21 sacks as an Indianapolis Colt. He's been sacked at a 5.7% rate, so lower than Johnny Unitas, but quite a bit higher than Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning was a master at getting rid of the ball and just going to the next down. So, very good player. And Peyton Manning does not show up anywhere in the top 10 as far as sacked all-time record, so he really was good at not being sacked. All right, let's move on to the running backs and see how they did career-wise. The leading running back is Edgerrin James, who from 1999 to 2005 had 9,226 yards. So currently, Jonathan Taylor's second, who's been on the team since 2020, he has 6,013 yards. So he won't catch Edgerrin James for another maybe 3 years if he has at least 1,000 yards a season. And very possible for Jonathan Taylor. He's had some big seasons, and we'll see that in a little bit, single seasons, but just has to stay healthy. So we'll see how it goes. But right now he's running second as far as yards go. When we're looking at TDs, again, he's moving up the list. Edgerrin James, as I said, is also number one in this category. He has 64 touchdowns. Lenny Moore, from 1956 to 1967, had 63. And then Jonathan Taylor's third with 51. So it's possible if Jonathan Taylor has a good season and has 13 touchdowns rushing, he would tie Edgerrin James for first all time. So that will be a definite category to be watching this season to see how he does as far as that goes. That'll be fun to watch. Those numbers aren't very high at the time, so hopefully Jonathan Taylor can not only pass Edgerrin James at some point, whether it's this season or next, and push this touchdown record much farther. So those are your running backs as far as rushing and touchdowns go. Let's look at receptions. Look at our wide receivers, tight ends, running backs out of the backfield. Two great players and a great team the Colts had when you had Peyton Manning, Marvin Harrison, and Reggie Wayne all playing together. So Marvin Harrison, from 1996 to 2008, had 14,580 yards. Reggie Wayne, from 2001 to 2014, had 14,345 yards. So only a difference of 235 yards. That is very amazing that these two were playing together for overlap for 7 years and just had such complementary games. As far as yards, just to look at this, but yards per reception, Marvin Harrison 13.2, Reggie Wayne 13.4. That just shows you how close the two were. Now, it does show up differently when we look at touchdowns, but as far as that goes, it's just interesting to see as far as the yards go. With those numbers, they're both in the top 10. Marvin Harris is 9th, and Reggie Wayne is 10th all time with the amount of yards they have. Now, when we go back and we look at receptions career-wise, it's a little bit different. But Marvin Harrison, again, 1,102. Reggie Wayne, 1,070. That's the receptions. And again, that puts them right there at Marvin Harrison at number 5 and Reggie Wayne at number 10 all time in the NFL. So just imagine you have 3 people that Hall of Famers when it comes to, and I don't know why, I'm not sure about Reggie Wayne if he is a Hall of Famer or not, but if he's not, he should be. But great players and a great team at the time. So those are your top 2 as far as receptions go. Currently, Michael Pittman had 405. And we're looking down the list here. So there's really no one anywhere near the top of this list. So it's going to be a while. But those, as far as that's your receptions and that's yardage. Let's look at touchdowns. Look at that. So Marvin Harrison, this is a big difference between Marvin Harrison and Reggie Wayne, the biggest difference by far. Marvin Harrison had 128 touchdowns receiving, while Reggie Wayne had 82. So big difference there. And those touchdown numbers put Marvin Harrison at number 5. Marvin Harrison at number 5 all time. Whereas there's only 12 players that have reached the 100 touchdown reception number, Marvin Harrison being one of those. But 82 is still a nice number. So very good. Michael Pittman up to last year had 18. So just nothing like those 2 players. All right. That's your wide receivers. Let's look at the tight ends. Dallas Clark. We'll go to receptions here and look at that. Again, Dallas Clark had 427 receptions. That's the leading tight end for the Indianapolis Colts as far as receptions go. So quite beating out John Mackey, who played from 1963 to 1971. He had 320. When we're looking at current tight ends, Indianapolis Colts have had a lot of tight ends, but they none of them just dominate all the time. It seems to go back and forth. So Mo Alley-Cox from 2018 to 2024 had 114 receptions. So that's the leading tight end as far as that number goes. And then Kylan Granson from 2021 to 2024 has 86. So again, a long ways to go. Won't be anything different happening as far as the records go coming into this season. When we're looking at yards and tight ends, we've got, again, John Mackey with 5,126 yards. So he's the top tight end. And same with touchdowns. Let's look at the touchdowns. You've got, again, Dallas Clark, this time actually with 46 touchdowns. John Mackey had 38. So between Dallas Clark and John Mackey, top two tight ends for the Indianapolis Colts. All right. When we're looking at running backs or players out of the backfield, Lenny Moore, halfback. He was a halfback. 1956 to 1967, had 363 receptions. Just beating out Edgerrin James, who from 1999 to 2005 had 356. So those are your top two running backs coming out of the backfield. Currently, there's not any running backs. Jonathan Taylor has 141 receptions. So, well, not too bad. Give him a few years. If he stays with the team, a few more years, he should be able to catch those players. Though 356, it would take him a while to do it, but there's a chance. All right, let's move on to the defense. Looking at the defense, we'll start with the interceptions. All-time leader, Bobby Boyd, from 1960 to 1968, he had 57 interceptions. That's the record for the Indianapolis Colts, 57. Don Shinnick from 1957, so they would have an overlap for sure, to 1969 had 37. And as I've always said, usually, in fact, it's not till the 13th spot you see somebody even in the 21st century. And that is Kenny Moore, 2017 to 2024, 20 interceptions. That's the best. So, again, this is an area where you probably won't see the 57 ever beaten. It's not impossible, but it's just a difficult record for the interceptions. Trying to break an interception record is just so hard anymore in this day and age of the NFL. All right. But looking at tackles for loss and sacks, you have a different story. These are records that can be broken. Dwight Freeney from 2002 to 2012 had 113 tackles for loss, while Robert Mathis from 2003 to 2016 had 108. So playing together, they both topped the 100 tackles for loss mark. Very impressive. Now, Grover Stewart from 2017 to 2024 has 40. So you can see, and same with Kenny Moore from 2017 to 2024 has 36. So neither one is going to be pushing Dwight Freeney or Robert Mathis, really. It's very doubtful. They're not even halfway there yet to the 100 mark. So not an area right now where the Colts have a dominant player. Not to say they're bad, but just nothing. Dwight Freeney was amazing as a defensive end. So we'll see what goes on with the defense. Looking at sacks, again, this time it's Robert Mathis with 123 sacks and Dwight Freeney with 107.5. The only two players with over 100 sacks. Usually this is an area where you see somebody newer. Now you do have DeForest Buckner from 2024 or 2020 to 2024. So already has 39. So he's a player to keep an eye on and see how that goes. But other than that, Kwity Paye 2021 to 2024 has 26 and a half. So really, at this moment, nobody really challenging those marks. All right, so that is the Indianapolis Colts as far as career goes. Now, when we shift over to a single season on the offense, again, obviously, and this is amazing when you're looking at it, though. We'll start with the quarterbacks. As far as most yards in a single season, if I was guessing, I would have said Peyton Manning, and I would have been wrong. It's Andrew Luck. 2014 had 4,761 yards passing. Peyton Manning in 2010 had 4,700. Those are your top two. Really, it would have been interesting to see how Andrew Luck would have done if he'd have been able to continue to play. But Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck hold the top 11 spots, one or the other. A little bit more of Peyton Manning, but still Andrew Luck was up there as well. So Andrew Luck leads the team with the yards. Touchdowns. Now, this is Peyton Manning. Peyton Manning in 2004 had 49 touchdown passes, which he's going to do even better a few years later. Andrew Luck was second in 2014. He had 40. The only two times that anybody went over 40. So very impressive in a single season. Now, going back to yards in the season real quick and looking at last season, there hasn't been a quarterback to stay with a team long enough to set any records. I mean, you had Phillip Rivers, Gardner Minshew, Carson Wentz. I mean, you can't, keep shifting quarterbacks all the time. So Anthony Richardson had 1,814 yards, and Joe Flacco had 1,761. So almost split evenly. But you combine their yards, you're talking about less than 3,600 yards between the two of them. So really, nothing to talk about there. So as I said, the touchdowns with Peyton Manning and Andrew Luck. And when you're looking at touchdown passes last year, again, Joe Flacco had 12. So, and Anthony Richardson had 8. So a total of 20 between the two of them. Now, it's interceptions. This is a little bit different. Peyton Manning, though, does lead the team with 28 interceptions. In 1998, had 28 interceptions, by far his worst record. 2001, he had 23, so a 5 interception difference. But Johnny Unitas was second and third and fourth. And he, in 1960, 1966, and 1961, he had 24 interceptions those 3 years. So see more Johnny Unitas than Peyton Manning. When you're looking at last year's players, again, Anthony Richardson had 12, but he didn't throw that many passes. He only had 126 completions. He had 12 interceptions. At the same time, when Peyton Manning's had 28, he threw 326 completions, 575 attempts, to Anthony Richards' 264, so more than double the attempts. But still, 28 interceptions is quite high for a quarterback of his caliber, but early in his career, obviously. So those are your tops as far as interceptions go. We're looking at sacks, the last category in a single season. Jeff George, 1991, was sacked 56 times, and Jacoby Brissett in 2017, another one of those rotating quarterbacks, he was sacked 52 times. Those are your sack leaders. Even though 56 is a lot, it's not enough to crack the top 12 times. But anyway, still heavily. And this is a category where you don't see Peyton Manning, for example. One year he was sacked 29 times. That's the most he's ever sacked. He was able to get rid of the ball quite quickly. And then we're looking at Richardson from last year, see how he did. Um, Obviously, he didn't play enough to really be up the list, um, no matter how many times he was sacked. But he was sacked, um, let me see here, 12 times. Is that right? Now, let me look at that. I'm sorry. Let me back it up real quick. Anthony Richardson was sacked 14 times. I'm sorry, 14 times. So, but he's elusive. Um, just to give you a little tidbit on it, Jeff George, when he was sacked 56 times, he was sacked 10.4% of the time he went back. He sacked 10.4, whereas Anthony Richardson was sacked at a 7.7% times. So a big difference. Still quite high though, even 7 point. That's just too high. But he was always looking for the big play. Richardson. We'll see how he does this year if he's even the starting quarterback. Just don't. Who knows? I don't know if anybody knows except for the coaches, and I don't even know if they know. All right, let's look at the rushing leaders on a single season. And again, this is where you've got a player playing today that has the record, so be something to watch. Jonathan Taylor in 2021 had 1,811 yards. That's the record for the Indianapolis Colts. Beat out Edgerrin James, who had the record since 2000. He had 1,709 yards. So those are your top two. Then you had Eric Dickerson, Hall of Famer right there. 1 year, 1988, had 1,659. That's impressive. And again, Edgerrin James. I'll tell you what, when you look at this list, the Indianapolis Colts have had some running backs, whether they stayed with the team or not. 1998, Marshall Faulk, 1,319. That's number 8 all time. So some great running backs. Even Lydell Mitchell, way back in 1975 and 76, had 1,200 yards and almost 1,200. So impressive lineup of running backs. But Jonathan Taylor tops the list as far as yards go. When we're looking at touchdowns, again, it's Jonathan Taylor. Same year, 2021, he had 18 touchdowns in a single season. Not quite enough to break the top 11 as far as players who have had at least 20 touchdowns. He broke the record held since 1964 by Lenny Moore, who was the halfback. When 1964 for the Baltimore Colts had 16 touchdowns. Now, the biggest difference is he did it in 14 games versus 17 games. So doesn't mean he would have gotten 18 or more, but it's a definite chance he could have went even higher than 16. But that's the top two players. When we're looking at yards this past season, obviously Jonathan Taylor came in at 7th for the Colts with 1,431 yards. So not a bad season at all, considering he played 14 games. So he's averaging 100 yards, a little over 100 yards a game. It's just too bad he couldn't stay healthy to play all of them. He could have really moved up and maybe even broke his own record. Who knows? And same with touchdowns. Last year, Jonathan Taylor had 11, which put him at number 8 all time as far as the Indianapolis Colts go. So anytime you can get 10 or more touchdowns in a year, that's great. Of course, 18 is incredible. Now, when we're looking at, we should back this up real quick. I wasn't looking at the quarterbacks, but we can definitely look at the running backs and see how they fared compared to the NFL as a whole. So when we're looking at yards, obviously Saquon Barkley, 2,005 yards. Derrick Henry, 1,921. And then there's a big drop-off. Jonathan Taylor was 4th behind Bijan Robinson. Robinson had 1,456, and then Taylor, like I said, had 1,431. So Jonathan Taylor in yards finished 4th in the NFL last year. But again, that's playing 14 games. Not that he would have caught the top 2 players who were way out there, but he definitely would have passed Robinson if he'd have played even one more game and had, 25 yards in that game. But that's just the way it goes. Touchdowns. Again, it was Derrick Henry for the Baltimore Ravens now. And then Jahmyr Gibbs, for Detroit Lions, and James Cook for the Buffalo Bills all had 16 touchdowns. And then Jonathan Taylor finished out 11th with 11 touchdowns. So those are your rushing leaders in the NFL. Jonathan Taylor represented well for the Colts as far as that goes. Now, looking at wide receivers in general, Marvin Harrison is the all-time leader in receptions for the Indianapolis Colts with 143 receptions. He broke his own record, which he had set in 1999. In 2002 he broke the record, but in 1999 he had 1,115. That's incredible. Top two wide receivers numbers held by Marvin Harrison. He holds the top three of the top four, and it would be Reggie Wayne, who's the third one. Only 10 times as a wide receiver had 100 or more receptions for the Indianapolis Colts. And last year, there was nobody anywhere near that. Josh Downs, 72 receptions. So kind of an off year. Michael Pittman Jr. had 69. That was it. Those are your top two. So quite a ways down the list as far as receptions go. And when you're looking at all time, not all time really, I should say just in 2024, with Josh Downs with 72 receptions. See, that only put him at 31st in the NFL last year. So really not too impressive. Not to say he's a bad player. It has a lot to do with the quarterbacks and the offense. Michael Pittman was 33rd. He had 69. So those are your top two, but quite a ways down the list. When we're looking at yards, I should say Jamar Chase led the NFL in receptions with 127. When you're looking at yards, again, Jamar Chase has 1,708 yards, which wouldn't have beat out Marvin Harrison, who holds the record for the Indianapolis Colts. In 2002, he had 1,722 yards. Very impressive. And that yardage puts Marvin Harrison at number 12 all time. If I didn't say it, I was going to say it. Marvin Harrison is third all time with his 143 receptions. Michael Thomas in 2019 for the New Orleans Saints had 149 receptions. So Cooper Kupp was second with 145 when he was with the Rams. In 2021, he did that. So those are your top two. And then you had Marvin Harrison. So quite impressive. Quite a player he was. So like I said, when it comes to yards, Jamar Chase finished number 14th all time and number one last year. But that's 1,708 yards. Only 14 times has somebody had 1,700 or more yards. And as I said, Marvin Harrison's 12th all time with his 1,722 yards. And as usual, when you're looking at these numbers, you got to remember that Marvin Harrison did it one less game as well. So very good. When you're looking at the wide receivers as far as yards, and you're looking at the Indianapolis Colts, you really don't have anybody. As I said, Downs would have been your best one. Him and Pittman were the top two, and they finished at, I'm going way down the list. Actually, I should amend that. It was because of his yardage. Alec Pierce finished 38th for the Indianapolis Colts. He had 824 yards, and the reason, but he only had, he only had 37 receptions, but he had yards per reception of 22.3, which led the NFL. So that's why he had so many yards with so few receptions. Michael Pittman was at 41st, and Josh Downs was 42nd. They had 808 and 803 yards respectively. So those two pretty much even all the way around, yards, receptions. And then you had, like I said, Alec Pierce. So you had three receivers with 800 to 824 yards. Very close, all three of them. Interesting numbers there. Then when we're looking at TDs, and again, Jamar Chase had 17 to lead the NFL. But as far as the all-time for the Indianapolis Colts, Marvin Harrison twice in 2001 and in 2004 had 15 touchdown receptions. So those are your top positions as far as the Indianapolis Colts go. Last year, again, nobody too far up the list. Alec Pierce in 41st, he had 7 touchdown receptions. That was the number one person in that category. You compare that, so he had 7, I said. That only puts him at 21st, tied for 21st in the NFL. So those are your top receivers. All right. When we're looking at the defense, we have, and we'll start with the interception leaders on defense. All time for the Indianapolis Colts is Mike Adams, who twice in 2014 and in 2015 had 5 interceptions. That's the all-time number for them. So really not too impressive, but so that's a number that could be broken. The last season, Kirby Joseph had 9 interceptions, but with 5, actually, Mike Adams would have been 5th last season, but of course he doesn't play for the team. So just throwing that out there. But last season, when I'm looking for an Indianapolis Colt, Nick Cross had 3. So that was your leading interception person for the Indianapolis Colts. Now, when we're looking at tackles for loss, last season, Myles Garrett had 22. He led the NFL in tackles for loss, 22. And when you're looking for an Indianapolis Colt player on this list, you have to go quite a ways down again to Zaire Franklin, who had 11. So half the amount of Myles Garrett. The record for tackles for loss for the Indianapolis Colts is held by Dwight Freeney. He has the number 1 and number 2 position. In 2002, he had 20. That's the record as far as the Indianapolis Colts. And in 2004, he had 17. So those are your leaders as far as tackles for loss go. And then we'll look at one final category, and that's sacks. Last season, Trey Hendrickson for Cincinnati had 17.5 sacks to lead the NFL. And when you compare that to an Indianapolis Colt on this list, you got, again, go quite a ways down the list, which is a shame for the defense that you have to go this far down the list. But DeForest Buckner had 6.5 sacks, which definitely shows you an area that needs to be improved. If you have your best defender only has 6.5 sacks, that's not going to cut it as far as your defense goes. As far as sacks go all time for the Indianapolis Colts, Robert Mathis in 2013 had 19.5, and Dwight Freeney in 2004 had 16. Those are your all-time numbers when it comes to sacks. So when you're looking at this team on offense, you got Jonathan Taylor, really a great player, and we'll see how they can benefit from using him in the right way and getting the most out of him for this 2025 season. We'll see how they do overall compared to the other teams in this division. Like I said, when I was talking about the Houston Texans, this is a division that's going to be a dogfight. It may not be considered the best division or anything like that, but it's still going to be a dogfight. I don't think Houston really improved their team much, and I think the other teams have. We'll talk about Tennessee in a couple of podcasts away. They have a brand new quarterback. The Jaguars, who we'll talk about in the next podcast, which is my team, we'll talk about them, and they've just revamped everything. We'll talk about that a little bit. So, and then you have the Indianapolis Colts, who have the possibility of having a pretty decent offense and defense. So it's just going to be kind of a odd year to really not be able to pinpoint who will come out on top. Most people think Houston Texans, but we will see. So that is a wrap for the Indianapolis Colts. If you want to hear my previous podcasts on other teams from the AFC East or North, you can go back and listen to those. Appreciate you listening. And I'd appreciate it if you would like this or subscribe or both. That'd be great. And I have opportunities for you if you want to post a question, a comment, or a suggestion, or even a correction. If you happen to hear me say something that's incorrect, let me know. You can go to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Just the Stats NFL and let me know what's on your mind. So that is a wrap for this episode of Just the Stats NFL. Until next time, I'm out.